All right, this is like the fourth take because my microphone chose to not work. I took it all in one take, and it was like 30 minutes, and I check it after there's no audio. So today we're talking about compound interest and why it's not sustainable. So what is compound interest? Compound interest is when you make interest on interest over time. So let's say the first year you make 10% on 10,000. That's 1,000. So the next year you make 10% on the principal, which is the 10,000, plus the interest that you made that year, which is 1,000. So you make 10% on 11,000. The next year you make 10% on the 11,000 plus that interest. What would it be? It would be like 12,100. You make 10% on 12,100, and so on. The thing is, over time, Albert Einstein did say it's the eighth wonder of the world. Why? Because it's exponential. Over time, it starts to pick up steam, and the problem is it takes around 30 to 35 years to really take off, for you to really reap the rewards of compound interest. 30 to 35, that's when it starts to take off. It's like a rocket. When you first start off, it's slow, but as time goes on, it starts to speed up until it's at max velocity. Of course, compound interest doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It's exponential. And most people don't understand the power of exponential functions. For example, let's say, I forget the exact thing, but it was like a penny doubled every day will give you like 1,600,000. But exponentially, it's really powerful. Even with a small interest or a small yield, it also takes off, but at a much slower rate. The reason because you make interest on the interest that you made. If you wait a long time, it'll be interest on interest on interest on interest, plus all the previous interests. It all adds up, plus the previous interest. It adds into the principal, which on that year you make interest on all those other years of interest, pretty much. It's like you're dipping every time there's a year. You're like triple dipping, quadruple dipping, and it just goes on and on. And here's why it's unsustainable. We like to think like, oh, I'll just invest. I'll get 10% every year and I'll be financially free. But why is that not possible? Well, because for there to be an exponential yield, there has to be an unlimited source, unlimited resource. Meaning you can't keep exponentially, you can keep going up if you have unlimited resources. But in this case, we're limited. When you go exponentially, you need resources to pull from. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It has to come from somewhere. Someone has to lose for you to win. I like to bring up the example of the coffee shop. Let's say this is an example of dividends. Instead of you reinvesting the money that you make from the coffee shop back into the coffee shop, let's say you make 10,000 one month, and you pay yourself. You take home 3,000. That 3,000 is now in your pocket. You extracted that from the business. The business doesn't have any profit anymore because you took it. Instead of making faster machines, better payment on site, like POS systems, better coffees, better espresso machines, you take that for yourself. That means the business doesn't grow anymore because you took that out. You extracted the value from it. You took the money from it. But the next year you expect to make 10% more. and 10% more the following year. Well, it doesn't work like that, because if you keep extracting but you don't invest more, you can't keep growing. You can't sustain growing at that pace. Another example would be Pepsi. I'm sure they don't give you all of their profit as dividends. They operate all their operating costs. They pay all their operating costs, everything it costs them to run as a company. And then after, if they have anything left over, they pay it to their shareholders. But there are several companies, it's called like dividend kings, dividend aristocrats. They actually increase their dividend every year. How does that work? Where's that money come from? There's a limited amount of demand. There's a limited amount of anything, frankly. For example, Pepsi, like let's say they're global. They're pretty much global. They have food and snacks everywhere. There's only so much demand they can get for their product. They can't force everyone to eat their product, to buy their product. So there's only so much marketing they can do. There's always going to be people that don't eat it at all because they want to stay healthy. There's going to be people that can't afford it. You can't force them. There's a limited amount of demand for the product. Whatever metrics you do, like whatever marketing you do, advertising, whatever tactic they use to get more customers, there's a limit to how much. Even if they get the whole population in the world, which is like 8 billion, I believe. Even if they get 8 billion people to buy and eat their product, it's still limited. It's nothing compared to the power of compound interest. As compound interest progresses over time, the exponential effect gets greater and greater. The line starts off flat, then it curves up a little. The longer time goes on, the straighter up the line is. Do you know how insane that is? A lot of people don't comprehend the concept of compound interest or exponential functions, like how powerful it is. If you have a grain of sand that doubles every couple of days or something, doubles is a lot. It's 100%. So if you put that into stock perspective, where does that come from? If you put it into capital gains now, let's say it increases in value by 10% every year. Where's that 10% comes from? Where's that come from? Well, someone has to sell it low and someone has to buy it higher. That's how it works. Or they sell it high and someone buys it low. Vice versa. It depends on the market, but as more people buy into the stock, the price rises. One justification for this is the constant rate of inflation. Every year they print more money, and everyone that pulls their money into dividends. Hold on. Got a weird notification, thought it was my bank. But as stock appreciation goes, where's that 10% yield come from, or that appreciation? It's because more and more people invest in their 401ks, their pensions. As more people pull money into these securities, these tools, the price goes up. And as more people have money, it keeps up with inflation, so to say. But let's say inflation stops, deflation happens. The value of your money is worth more. Well, then the stocks will be overpriced or overvalued. Not overpriced. It'll look like 110, but in reality it's worth 90. So where's that money go? Well, people start to pull it out. Another example of why compound interest is not sustainable is, let's say you get dropped off at a deserted island. The first year, maybe you find some vegetables, you find some food, and you eat it, you plant it. The first year you start planting because it'll be easier, you don't have to hunt all the time. The second year, it's even easier because now you have even more seeds to plant. The next year, you have even more seeds, like as much seeds as you need. But there comes a time when you're at your peak manpower. You're at the limit. All day you're watering the plants, you're sowing seeds, you're cutting them, you're harvesting them, you're eating, you're sleeping. You don't have more time to plant more crops because they'll go bad or they'll die. You don't have time to harvest them because you're already at maximum capacity. And here's what society does. Everyone has that cap. The exponential aspect is how many plants you could plant. Or not how many plants, but the aspect of seeds that grow more and more and more and more. So every year you get increasingly more amounts of seeds and plants and fruits, vegetables, whatever it is. But you're limited to manpower. In the real world, you have to hire someone and you pay them less. That's how businesses work. Let's say an accountant brings in $100,000 in value. You're only going to pay him 60 to 70K because you're trying to make money. You're not trying to lose money. Everyone's in the market to make money. So when he gets paid $60,000, he's getting exploited for his $100,000 of work. Of course, it's fine because you're giving him a stable job. If he wants to do it on his own, he could. Or he has the option to. But it'll be a lot harder because he has to manage everything. He has to put the system in place. But compound interest... Hold on, I don't want to get off track. Okay. You have to pay someone less. Compound interest only works if you have an unlimited source. Right now, okay, we're limited on labor, but in society, we have somewhat of an unlimited pool of the labor force. You can hire more people. And the more accountants you hire for your firm, the more money your business makes. So the business owner, let's say he makes $30,000 on every accountant he hires, and he have an endless flow of work or endless flow of contracts to do. As long as he can hire more workers, he will make more money. That's when compound interest works. When you can use this money, make money on it, use that money that you made from that and make more money. I hope I'm explaining it simply. I'm explaining it as simple as possible. But in the real world, compound interest rewards those who have capital already. People that have money in the markets already. People that have money in houses and real estate, in investments already. Because as more people pour in for that compound interest, they're already in. They're taking it on a ride. While you get up on the top, while it slopes down, while it falls down, they already rode it from the bottom. That's where the real money is. It's time in the markets. Of course, if you get in at the wrong time, it may take several decades to recover. Or not decades, but pretty long time. If I look at my notes, compound interest. It grows exponentially and snowball getting bigger as it rolls downhill. Practically. As the snowball gets bigger, there's more surface area to collect more snow. So as it rolls down, it's going to collect more and more snow. But at a certain point, what if it runs out of snow? Like, it's now considered the distance versus the thickness of the snow that it picks up. If the snow is thin, it picks up less snow. But the time and distance, that's like a lower rate of return It's still picking up snow, but it's going to be a longer time frame for it to pick up and roll and develop that big of a snowball. But let's say there's a limited amount of snow, which means there's a limited amount of resources. You can't keep picking up resources if it runs out. If it keeps going and going, but you don't have enough productivity, what compound interest is essentially is extracting from the system. For example, the government gives out loans. They pay interest on those loans. They have to pay more on them. Right now, the global debt is $300 trillion. But the global GDP, that means like every country, how much they produce, is only 100 trillion. Even if everyone spent all their money to try and pay it off, it's not going to work because of compound interest. This is especially true with credit cards. If you miss a payment on credit cards, or like a whole year, the interest is insane. It's 30%, give or take. It's like 20 to 30, depending on your credit. But that's a big rate, and that picks up faster than any other instrument out there. I know this guy from college. He's my roommate. I can't believe I have to explain this to him. He told me he has like auto loan, credit card debt. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna invest like you. I wanna make 10% dividends. I'm like, what? What do you mean? So he told me, he's like, all right, my credit card is like, he has credit card debt. I'm like, shouldn't you pay that off first? He's like, yeah, but what if I make money and pay the credit card off? I'm like, well, it doesn't work like that. You're not guaranteed to make 10%. It's up and down. You're not for sure gonna make 10% on your stocks. It's not guaranteed. It goes up, down. It could go to zero. It's a gamble. And you have credit card debt, which is 30%. Like if you are just starting off in college, most people, it's 30%. It's like 29.99%. He also has an auto loan. I'm like, yo, I told him for like 2 weeks. I'm like, yo, you should pay it off. Pay off your debt first. And then you can focus on investing. And he's like, yeah, I'll just grow it. And then the next week he's like, oh, I just made $3 on my stocks. I'm like, okay, but I don't know why it's not getting through to him. He's an accounting major, going for CPA. I'm like, what are you talking about? For 2 weeks, I kept explaining, he didn't get it. But this is the one story that finally got to him. I'm like, okay, you put a bucket under a faucet, and the hole is how much you have to pay in interest. There's a hole in the bucket. If there's a wider hole in the bucket than how much money is from the faucet, that means you're losing money. Does the water fill up or does it empty? Will you have more water in the bucket? He thought about it. He's like, I finally get you now. I finally understand what you're saying. It took me that long to get it through to people. So I'm like, maybe this is not common sense. I thought it was common sense because if whatever rate is higher, it's going to outperform the other because exponential. And because it's like whichever one's higher is going to be exponential faster. So his credit card debt was going to be exponential faster than his dividends. And also because every year you have a net loss. I'm like, bro, you're losing 20% by investing in stocks. Whatever you put into stocks, you're still losing 20%. Like wherever it goes, up, down, sideways, you're losing 20% for sure. At least. You know why? Because when you're investing in stocks, at most 10% a year, like average, not at most, but your credit card debt, it's set at 30%. Even if you make 10%, you're still 30% underwater. So if you minus that, that's 20% net loss. So I told him, and it finally got through to him. So he's like, oh, I finally paid it off a couple weeks later, a couple months later. I'm like, that's great. Smart. Let's see. Compound interest grows exponentially. Debt owes, yeah, we covered that. Okay, as you expect more from the system, from your investments, this creates the pressure to extract more. And in the instance of the coffee shop, if you keep extracting more from it, if it makes 10,000, you pull 3,000 from it instead of buying new machines. You're extracting more resources, but the next year you want 4,000, the next year you want 5,000. It puts a strain on the system because the coffee shop doesn't make more money. If you invested more money into it, buying better machines, faster payment systems, better everything, then it does have a chance of making more money. Then you could give yourself the same amount or the same percentage. But if every year you want that to grow, then it's not feasible because then it'll be exponential. You can't have an increase on your yield and also have an increase on the income. There's a trade-off. There can be it, but it's unsustainable. A lot of commotion, but this keeps a strain to extract more consumption, more labor, more resources. If you don't have unlimited amounts of resources, it's going to be hard. And for most businesses, it's not the supply issue, it's the demand issue. I was working on business and I asked one of my friends, I'm like, what's the hardest thing? He's like, getting more sales. I'm like, yeah, no shit. When can you have enough sales? I was like, that's the most simple answer I could ever hear of. That's the most simple problem. Every business has that. You can never have enough customers. If you're selling products at a profit, why would you want less customers? The only reason or way is that people have problem with supply is if they're resellers or if they make their own brand and it's limited stock to artificially increase demand, then supply would kind of be an issue, but you kind of made it yourself. If there was infinite supply, then the price won't be that high. For example, back then there was fidget spinners. There was a shortage, kind of a shortage. There's too much demand for it, but most people can't get it. People are selling it for $8. People are selling it for $10, $15. Insane amounts of money. Even Supreme, the price is high because there's limited stock, and that's when the whole hypebeast era took off. When you have limited stock, it artificially decreases supply and sometimes increases demand. If you have a bad product, bad brand, and you say, oh, we have little, people are like, oh, good. Like, they don't care. But when things are marketed, when things are sought after, and they have limited supply, it skyrockets the price. Next is perpetual debt traps. Governments borrow more and they have to repay more than they originally borrowed. For example, you borrow $10,000. The next year you have to pay back $15,000, but your income stayed the same. How are you going to pay that back? This puts a strain on the system, like we said before. When you can't pay back your debt, it's hard to make money. But for the lenders, for the investors, for the banks, they make all the money. And I was thinking of this the other day. I'm like, okay, if the stat is like 80% of businesses fail in 5 years, so as time goes on, there's more and more businesses that fail. But what doesn't fail? What do they all use? They all use the bank. So whether the businesses win or lose, they become successful or fail, it doesn't matter. The bank just gives them money if they need it. You have to give them money. The banks just loan them money. And either way, if they win or if they lose, they still have to pay the bank back. The bank just makes a small percentage on it. In some cases, it's a big percent. I see personal loans, it's like 13 to 16, 18%, around there. They just make that constant return, and they don't care if your business skyrockets or fails. They make money either way. 90% of businesses fail. Well, they don't care. If you make money, if you lose money, they don't care. They just take your money. Compound interest mainly benefits those who loan money, who have capital already. It benefits the banks, the lenders, and investors. It compounds their wealth, the money they have in the market already. It makes it bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's bad for those who pay interest, the workers, the borrowers, and the poor countries. They fall behind because of compound interest. But instead of APY, it's APR. Annual percentage yield versus annual percentage rate. Rate is what you have to pay. Yield is how much you earn from it. Over time, compound interest funnels money upwards. What this means is the wealth inequality gets bigger and bigger. As the people who own assets get most of the money back, the people without assets get sucked dry of money. This is the modern day where you have to pay to use other resources. Let's say there's a mall. You use the mall. People build stores in the mall because of the high foot traffic. Those stores are paying the owner of the mall to have their store there, to potentially make money. But who owns the resource? Who owns the real estate? It's the property owner. When he owns that place, he gets to use it, and people pay him to use it. If you have real estate, any real estate, houses, people pay you to use your real estate, to rent your real estate. Because you own it, people have to rent it. There's also a risk of financial collapse. Let's say the debt burden becomes way too much that people default. Systems fail, such as the '08 crisis, the housing bubble. Why did it fail? Well, prices can't keep going up forever. They kept giving out very cheap loans, no qualification. They just gave everyone, left and right, home loans. And as more people buy and buy, they're like, oh, it's gonna go up forever. Well, it doesn't work like that. When the price keeps going up and up and up, that price has to come down. Where does that price come from? Where does the money come from? It comes from the new people trying to invest, and they put more money into it than the previous people. That's how prices keep getting pushed up and up. And eventually, it just crashes because they're like, oh, we can't support it. We made a bunch of money, but when the obligations came, they couldn't support it. They couldn't meet those. So it collapsed. The bottom line is compound interest is a great tool for individuals. For people that want money to make money on money. But it's not good if everyone does it. If everyone does it, that means everyone is trying to exploit the system. And when that strain on the system is created, it's gonna fail. Because when everyone is expecting increasingly amounts of return, exponential return on their investment, that resource has to come from somewhere. And that resource, if everyone does it, that resource can't come from the same people because it's finite. You only make so much in a year. That compound interest, it's exponential. You can't pull an infinite amount of resource, exponential amount of yield from a limited resource. So at some point, you can't exploit the working class any more than you can, and the system will fail. And that'll be all for today.